Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome to the Shitbox Rally Autumn 2023 wrap video, aka the 5,500 kilometre adventures of Jody, Mr X, in a $1,200 200,000 mile Mercedes Benz. This is the 30th Shitbox Rally. They've raised over $38 million for cancer research, including more than $2 million on this rally alone, 30,000 of which was thanks to us, and of course thanks to you and your generous donations. The rally started in Newcastle, New South Wales on Saturday the 13th of May, but we all had to be there the night before for the briefing. These official photographs give you an idea of the scale of the event and the level of organisation involved. 230 cars plus at least 20 support vehicles equals 500 plus people on a travelling circus through the outback, sometimes quite literally. Now, I booked the accommodation in Newcastle, so it was affordable, and after a nervous sleep we arrived at the start along with 498 of our new best friends. Morning, Shitbox Rally Day 1. Got my hat on, got my name on it. Mr X is here. Say hello, Mr X. Hello. Here we are. And we are at the daily briefing, the morning briefing. So many shitboxers, so many shitboxers, and we're waiting for the man there to tell us what we're doing for the day. What we were doing for the day was driving from Newcastle to the small town of Nyngan in country New South Wales, population 1,998. A fairly uneventful day in theory at least, on all sealed road surfaces in our buddy group convoys. However, I foolishly let Mr X drive for a stint on day one. As you can see from my face here, he was driving a little too fast for my liking. He was also driving a little too fast for the front left indicator's liking, because it decided to leave us in its entirety halfway through the day, never to be seen again. Now, one of the best parts of the rally was admiring other people's shitboxes, and as you can see here, there were no shortage of them, including another green Mercedes just like ours. You'll see that one again later on. However, if your car was deemed too good to be classified as a shitbox, there were penalties. There was ritual humiliation in front of 500 people at the morning briefing. As the sun set on Nyngan, we settled in for the first of 6 nights under canvas, separate tents of course, and dreamt about the dirt roads that awaited us on day 2. Day 2 started as every day did with a morning briefing, although there was even more of a party atmosphere than usual because it was circus day. As Mr X and I are already clowns, we didn't bother with the dress up, which was a bit of a shame. We were so last minute getting ourselves and our car to the start line that we didn't really have time to take on some of the more frivolous elements of the rally, perhaps next time. Day 2 was Nyngan to Packsaddle. Packsaddle, by the way, has a population of 81 and makes Nyngan look like a sprawling metropolis by comparison. It started on nice bitumen roads like this one. The weather was pretty much perfect for the entire 10-day trip, by the way, as you'll see. We passed through Cobar, an important mining town, before doing another couple of 100 k's on sealed bitumen, before finally hitting the dirt. Sort of. Day 2. Done 1,000 k's and we are about to hit our first proper dirt roads. So we're all getting spaced out so that it's not just a massive pile of dust and we all crash into each other. But yeah, there's not a lot around here, I have to say. It's kind of a bit sparse, like a lot of the outback. This spacing of buddy groups was quite a regular occurrence. You really had to leave 200 to 800 metres between vehicles, otherwise you'd be driving into dust, which is to all intents and purposes exactly the same as driving in thick fog. But unlike on day 1, I didn't make the mistake of letting Mr X drive. I decided I would be taking the first stint on the dirt. Now, it looks pretty cruisy from this GoPro footage. Mind you, this all does have camera stabilisation on, so it doesn't quite give you a true reflection of the conditions, but you can see the rooster tail coming off the car in front. To be honest, the surfaces varied considerably from 120 kilometers an hour unsealed freeways to, oh my god, I'm gonna die, why aren't we allowed 4x4s on this rally? There was quite a bit of that on day 4 coming up. But this passing cattle truck gives you an idea of what it was like driving on dirt with so much dust. Within 5 seconds of its passing, you are enveloped by a cloud with little to no chance of seeing beyond it, so you just pull over and wait. That wasn't even a big truck, by the way. The scenery really started to crank up on day 2. The colours were amazing. The sky, the dirt, the scrub, all harmonious, all beautiful in their own way. And we got treated to the first in a series of desert sunsets, the likes of which I've never seen before. Mercedes still doing the business? Yeah. Not bad at all. The scenery is pretty incredible. Packsaddle, as discussed, lacked certain amenities, such as anything other than a pub, but it was a nice pub, and we settled into a dinner of dead animal and a fuel queue that lasted several hours. The old mate on the Bowser was clearly in no rush, and in between numerous rums took great pleasure in telling everyone that he'd never been to Sydney. Clearly things move a little more slowly in the country. By the way, shout out to my friend and colleague at the Opera House, Marcus. This is Marcus, and along with his brother Michael, they were Bill and Ben, the shitbox men, and they took that title seriously. Their Mitsubishi Mirage was undoubtedly one of the worst cars there of all 230, but like all bar one of the others, it made it to the finish. Thanks to Marcus for a lot of the footage of Mr X and I and our Mercedes. I often felt like there was somebody watching me on the rally, because often there was. Good morning, greetings from the very beginning of day 3. It is around 6:30 AM. Day 3 is Packsaddle to Inaminka, about 500k, mixture of bitumen and dirt. Now I don't normally get up this early, which is a bit of a shame, or at least it would be a shame if I lived in the bush, because that is our sunrise this morning. That is pretty spectacular. So we camped just opposite the roadhouse there. That's Mr X and I. And yeah, that is rather pleasant and only getting nicer, to be honest, as time goes on. The sunrises were probably better than the sunsets and sure took the sting out of waking up at 6 in the morning. That's me in the middle throwing my hat aloft, by the way, and you know you're falling in love with your car when you start taking shots of it in portrait mode so the background blurs. I'll be honest though, I was in love with this Merc long before we left Sydney. Thank you to the good people of Packsaddle. Everybody on our travels was lovely, but I think they were the loveliest of all. But all good things must come to an end, and after doing our morning stretch routine, we were off on the road once more. A couple of 100 k's of very pleasant sealed road and stunning weather took us to Tibubura. That's me in the middle again. More importantly, it took us to the Tibubura pub. There was rather a lot of alcohol consumed on the shitbox rally. Mr X and I did sink a couple of bottles over the course of the rally, but of course, there was zero alcohol. Back on the dirt to finish the day, as we moved from New South Wales to Queensland and then finally into South Australia all on the same day. It became obvious that certain state governments spent more on their unsealed roads than others. Queensland's were the best, South Australia's were the worst, and New South Wales somewhere in between. They were all fun though, as you can see from the big cheesy grin on my face after enjoying the car bottoming out on a triple dip. We did actually visit a place of genuine historical significance on day 3, the Burke and Wills Dig Tree that was the beginning of the end for two of Australia's most famous colonial pioneers. I'm sure the significance was not lost on my fellow drivers, even though most of them seemed more concerned with having another beer or locating their selfie stick.
Lorna, where's your selfie stick?
And it was all beginning to get a bit Mad Max by this point as well. On the way to the tree, we saw this Holden Commodore. On the way back from the tree, it was being picked for parts, including its sump and its entire fuel tank. The sump ended up on another Commodore, but the fuel tank ended up strapped to the back of a Proton for the rest of the rally. Arguably the finest piece of bush mechanicking I've ever seen. Inaminka was another town of less than 50 people, but it still had a racecourse, and that's where we camped for the night. This was the local family who were serving us drinks. The baby was about 6 months away from pouring its first rum and coke, and about 9 months away from drinking its first rum and coke. Good morning. Morning of day 4. Another silly hat. Another stunning sunrise. The bush sunrises have just been incredible. Last night we were on a racecourse. This big dusty racecourse in Inaminka. Inaminka is a town of about 40 people, so we are having a huge impact on the local population, as you can well imagine. But it is just amazing, these bush sunrises. Enormous skies. And yeah, fairly stunning. Today, 350 kilometers, all of it on dirt roads. Let's go. Indeed, let's. Shortest day, but also the roughest day and the best day. Most in South Australia, and we already know how bad their unsealed roads are. Plus, it was Princess Day, which led to the sight of several hundred burly, hairy men dressed as princesses, including a number of Leias, and a few actual princesses paying their own special tribute to Lady Di. Again, Mr. X and I didn't get the memo, which is just as well because nobody needs to see him in chiffon and sequins. At least all the cars got a bath first thing, which is more than a lot of my fellow drivers managed over the course of a week. And what a day it was. More amazing vistas, more amazing colours, but a real car breaker. The organiser actually apologised for the state of the roads at the following day's briefing, but the more cars that broke, the more fun we had, especially as they were being repaired by princesses, don't forget. Our car got first a slow puncture and then a fast puncture. Mr. X was driving again. Do you see a pattern emerging here? But a single puncture was nothing compared to some of the rough and tumble that affected other cars. For example, Bill and Ben's Mirage cracked its sump, but several princesses came to the rescue, as did two gentlemen wearing pom-poms, and a bit of putty and some borrowed oil later. They were off again. And Mr. X and I got to play hero a bit later in the day. Remember that green Mercedes from earlier on? That one was owned by Richard, who I got to know over the course of the rally. Richard didn't get the memo that the fuel pump on these W202s is exposed, and as a consequence he destroyed his earlier that evening. Well, that was one memo that I did get, and there were plenty of bemused looks when I handed over exactly the right part the man needed to fix his Mercedes in the middle of all the Outback. And the day's driving ended with half an hour I'll never forget as we crossed back into Queensland onto unsealed road that felt like sealed road by comparison to what we'd just been on. I put my foot down and our Mercedes seemed to float effortlessly towards the horizon, and we got the tail end of yet another stunning sunset. That night we camped in Batuta. Another 3-hour fuel queue followed, and at its head was another old mate, full of rum, manning a single Bowser. He'd probably never been to Sydney either, which I don't necessarily blame him for. And a tough day for the cars meant that the evening's triage was an exciting place to be. It stank of petrol, and the sight of 3 men underneath the bonnet of a Jag is something that will live with me for a long, long time to come. We got our puncture repaired at the bush equivalent of tyre power. It was a flat fee of $50 for whatever tyres the farmer had in his shed. A great day that was capped by one of the most incredible night skies that I've ever seen. Good morning, day 5. I'm looking rougher by the day. Welcome to Batuta, home of Australia's finest satirical newspaper, and not much else. We camped on the surface of the moon last night, covered in small rocks and broken glass, but as has come to be the way now, just another stunning sunrise. Almost getting slightly blasé now after a few of these. Almost, but not quite. So day 5 was fairly straightforward. Batuta to Yarraka on a mixture of sealed and unsealed roads. I think this drone shot illustrates just how small the places we were staying were and how big an impact our travelling circus had on them. Mr. X and I did a bit of jerry can adjustment before we set off. We resisted the urge to get drunk at the Batuta Hotel and then settled in for another day inside the dusty cabin of a Mercedes. And the day passed relatively uneventfully. Just the usual mixture of men underneath broken down cars and dust. Lots of dust. I was developing a smoker's cough by this stage, even though I haven't had a cigarette in many a long year, and I heard the same rasp on more than a couple of locals as well. And despite the fact that day 5 was pretty easy, and despite the best efforts of triage the night before, there were still a few cars that looked a little worse for wear. But everybody made it to our destination, which was another racecourse just outside Yarraka. Those who arrived early played cricket, those who drunk late, buddy group tug of war. Those whose cars were broken down headed to triage once more for the most dubious looking cocktails I've seen in years. Good morning, day 6. I must admit I'm a little bit chilly this morning. I'm not a real Scotsman anymore. It is cold in the bush though. There's not a cloud in the sky, so it does get cold at night, warm during the day. We are at Yarraka, staying at another race course. I'm not quite sure when the horses ran on this particular course, and I may be a little cold, but we have all been rewarded by another simply stunning sunrise. And we were also rewarded by the sounds of Barbara Streisand ringing across the racecourse courtesy of Mr X, who brought a record player with him. I'm not even kidding, some people didn't bring soap to save weight, but he brought a record player and 15 pieces of vinyl. He really is the most ridiculous human being I've ever encountered. Moving swiftly along, day 6 should have been straightforward, but it turned out not to be quite as easy as we thought. It should have been a straight run north to Hughenden on the usual mixture of sealed and unsealed roads, and it started out as planned, but just after Longreach, the first groups on the road encountered a bit of a problem, causing all the other groups to back up behind them in a huge long snake, as you can see here. The problem was a very rough and sandy four-wheel drive track that was possible for our non-four-wheel drive vehicles to get through, but not without some effort. Not quite sure why this Mitsubishi Lancer was going backwards, perhaps it didn't have a tow hook on the front. I give the 4 guys that ended up on their faces 8 out of 10 for effort, but only a 6 out of 10 for style. Somebody did find some plastic tracks, however, and cars were able to get through, quite spectacularly in some cases. This was one of 5 other Mercedes on the rally people were referring to as the Mercador because it had a 3.8 litre V6 from a Holden Commodore that had been fitted to it a decade prior. Unfortunately, just as our buddy group were about to take on the dip, we were told that the whole rally had been turned around, meaning we had just wasted about 2.5 hours going nowhere. So what should have been a long day turned into a very long day. Long enough that yet more of our group needed some roadside surgery, but there was something particularly satisfying about watching an exhaust be removed using a battery powered grinder on the side of the road. And the long day didn't stop the party atmosphere, though slightly worryingly, the people dancing to loud music, wearing flashing shoes and encouraging everyone else to do shots were one of the medical support crews. Thankfully, none of us required their support and we made it to Hughenden relatively unscathed.
Good morning, day 7. Last day, and do you know what that means? Last sunrise. Never mind. I'm a little dusty today because my bed collapsed during the middle of the night. That's going in the bin when we get to Townsville. It's a pretty easy run in, 350k on sealed roads today. We have done the last of the dirt, which is just as well because the car is utterly, disgustingly filthy and I've been coughing up dust at regular intervals. So we'll need to get that cleaned. But yeah, the rally is pretty much done and it has been fantastic.
And that was pretty much it. I packed up my tent for the final time and then put it in the bin, along with the stretcher that had collapsed on me the night before, and headed for breakfast, which was served by Swedish chefs. Of course it was served by Swedish chefs. Now I do owe someone an apology. I missed them in the donations thank you video, and that person is my mother. She gave us the $250 that you're obliged to hand over if you don't want your car auctioned off on day 8. Mr X and I drove home on day 8, so we definitely needed to pay the fee. Thanks, Mum. Richard also drove his Mercedes home, although it was missing a few parts, including, by the sounds of it, the muffler. All that remained to be done was cross the finish line in a blaze of glory, admire a couple of group photos with our buddies, wash the car, which is still pretty filthy to be honest, and then not quite make it to the party afterwards to accept the plastic trophy that came with being the 6th place highest fundraising team, because we had indeed gone home.
You've gone home.
All in all, a fantastic experience for a great cause. The Merc performed flawlessly and we raised a ton of money for charity. Thanks for watching, all the best. What? You're still here? Well, yeah, that wasn't quite the end. Mr X had to be at work on Monday, so we drove home over the weekend. 1,000 kilometres per day over 2 days down the Great Inland Way. And despite having carried 2 20-litre jerry cans on our roof the entire time, we ran out of petrol. Mr X was driving, so I blame him. But it did mean that he flagged down a road train and got a lift with a long-haul trucker. The man Clinton was a total legend. We filled up one of our jerrys and we were moving again within 40 minutes, but I can't hide my embarrassment about running out of fuel with 2 empty jerry cans on the roof. Lesson learned, always fill up in the bush. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for donating. I'll see you again in the future, I hope.